USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And our buddy Larry Craig has, as you've read, withdrawn his guilty plea. We'll see where that's going to leave him. Probably in more trouble than he ever thought.
We will rediscuss. As he repositions his plea, we'll rediscuss. Meanwhile, New Jersey Governor Corzine has come out for same-sex marriage, although not immediately.
Yeah. But the California legislature has again passed a same-sex marriage bill, and Governor Schwarzenegger looks like he is again going to veto it.
We'll tell you how you can weigh in with your opinion on that to him. Congress held its first ever hearing.
Well, no, I wouldn't say Congress.
Maybe on
the Senate passed it once. We're talking about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. There was a hearing on it. We'll tell you about that.
Jerry Lewis.
Hey, Dean.
Pretended to apologize for
I didn't mean it.
Anti-gay slur.
And a new reason to hate Star Jones that Ann is going to tell us about.
Can't wait. And our guest this week is filmmaker Louise Hogarth on her new documentary on AIDS orphans in South Africa called Angels in the Dust, which opens this week in New York. You may remember her previous documentary, The Gift, about gay men deliberately giving and receiving HIV. Oh, yeah. We'll talk to her about both.
Okay.
But we start with Larry Craig. Now, I have my own little joke going on Larry Craig, which you object to. I call it his new gay panic defense.
Well, he is saying, we have a copy of his filing with the state of Minnesota, he is saying that he was panicked because he knew he was under investigation by the Idaho statesman for this gay stuff. He had denied it to them back in May, but they were interviewing scores of people in his life and going to restrooms with his picture to show it to people. You know, what a man. He was denying, so he's saying I was panicked and that's why I pled guilty, but wait a minute. He was arrested June 11th. He didn't plead guilty until August the 1st without consulting a lawyer. So I don't know how you can call that a panic. Was he panicked? I mean, I think maybe we should discount all the votes he made in Congress during that period. He was clearly unstable.
His lawyers say, while in this state of intense anxiety, Senator Craig felt compelled to grasp the lifeline offered to him by the police officer. Namely that if he were to submit to an interview and plead guilty, then none of the officer's allegations would be made public. Now, we have gone back and forth on Senator Craig on this show, and once again, I have to say, this smacks so much of the way cops manipulate people and threaten them and emotionally blackmail them into all sorts of pleas. I've seen it done repeatedly to me and my activist colleagues. They sit there and they say, oh, we're going to ruin your life if you don't do what we say.
So why didn't Larry Craig stand up for us?
Because he is a scared, closeted person, and that is who is vulnerable to this kind of emotional blackmail.
But his filing is just deny.
Exactly. I mean, he's still trying to ride this horse of I am not gay. I
didn't do anything.
Gay, I didn't do anything. Now, even Pat Buchanan, I never thought the day would come when I would quote Pat Buchanan in agreement. Pat Buchanan on Hardball this week said, look, let's get real. There's no question what this guy was doing. Of course he was asking for sex, to which we agree. He was asking for sex. But the point where we differ with the police is we don't think that was wrong. We think adults should be able to ask each other for sex, and do every day.
Well, and having said that, I mean, that doesn't mean that we think that people should be able to, in public places, do whatever they want in front of people. That disturbs people.
Or
but
if
you do it in a public place and you have any expectation of privacy, what's the problem?
Exactly.
Or not, I shouldn't say any expectation, a total expectation of privacy.
And heterosexuals come on to each other suggesting sexual encounters all day, every day, and no one gets prosecuted for that. But gay men get arrested. No attempt to stop this activity. Just let's arrest the queers. Let's get money out of them. Let's ruin their lives.
And you've even got some of these cops going on the internet to lure the men to the restrooms in the airport. That's nice.
Well, they're gonna, if Larry Craig succeeds in getting his guilty plea withdrawn, that doesn't end it. He's now going to be prosecuted for the original charges and not the reduced charge that he pleaded guilty to. And part of that charge is going to be that he was peering into the stall to look at this guy. No mention of the fact that the guy was sitting there staring back at him, inviting him with a locked glance into his eyes. No, they're going to prosecute him for that.
Well, the saga goes on. Now, is he going to...
Well, once again, do we hate Larry Craig? Yes, but not for this.
Bad guy. Bad guy. And Mike Rogers, who broke the story back in October about Larry Craig and essentially got the Idaho Statesman to investigate this, is now being reported by the Washington Post and the Buffalo News to be the most feared man in Washington.
But has co-hosted this show.
But a lot of people are shaking a lot less in their boots because Mike has announced on his blogactive.com website that he's not going to go after congressional staffers who are closeted, who work for horror shows and support them. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, the question is, are they public figures? You know, everyone's going after Mike for doing this. They criticize him, you know, how dare you out people. No one remembers to mention that these are public figures, the rest of whose lives we consider an open book. We're perfectly happy to talk about their wife and kids and their, you know, softball playing or bridge groups or whatever. It's just this, once again, it's the stigma of homosexuality that suddenly makes it off base. But the question is, are the staffers public figures and therefore subject to the same kind of public reporting?
Yes. Well, I think they are. We asked you to make suggestions now that Larry Craig has blown it for everybody and toe tapping. Somebody said you can't go into, I haven't been to a public restroom lately, but they said you can't go in now without somebody like tapping their toes just for fun. You know, ha 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 ha. So that's blown as a signal. So one viewer suggested sketching a figure 8 on the floor with your or a repeated sideways swipe. Another one suggested humming the first few bars of Over the Rainbow.
That's somewhere
as
over
a
the
signal,
rainbow.
yes, somewhere over the rainbow. But, you know, in the midst of all this, you know, this is a big scandal. Everybody's talking about how horrible it was and everything. And there's a story in the Times about, you know, a travel thing about an affair that Franklin Roosevelt had with this woman in the next town. And it's just treated like a little travel story. I mean, that's pretty scandalous that the President of the United States was going up the hill to have sex with somebody else. But that's treated as a nice story, as opposed to Larry Craig.
If you wonder how oblivious these other elected officials are, you then see Senator John McCain in New Hampshire being questioned by high school students, one of whom asks him about rights for LGBT people, and he says, what? Huh? What do you mean?
Well, so he comes out against all that stuff, and that kid asking him the question was great.
Yes.
I mean, says something along the lines, I mean, I have a story right in front of me, but says something along the lines of, well, you know, it's very disappointing to hear that you're not backing people up and all this kind of stuff, which is the kind of follow-up that we would have liked from the HRC and Logo, you know, when they were asking questions of these people, when they were giving terrible answers in some cases. And then some kid asks a question about his age, you know, and he makes a joke about it. Then he says, you little jerk, you're going to be drafted, like that, which is a pretty awful, nasty thing, because what it says is that being drafted and serving in our military is punishment in this country.
Well, he's a nasty guy.
Well, he's promoting this war as if it's noble service, and then he makes a joke about drafting people.
All right.
Enough of that. Well, and in Fresno, somebody has been fighting a bathroom sting case since 2002.
Yes.
And beat the rap, but not on the grounds that they wanted to be beaten on.
Well, he was convicted, but it was overturned because there was no offended audience. And in fact, that is part of the Craig statute that he supposedly, what's the word I want, broke. Because that requires that you offend people or you disturb people, the disorderly conduct statute. And he, of course, didn't by simply tapping his toe.
Right, but the judges in this case did not rule that it was overthrown.
The Fresno case.
Right, because it was homosexual activity, and they don't go after heterosexual activity. It was that they didn't establish that someone was likely to be present who would have been offended by the contact.
His conviction was overturned. He's now going to sue for discrimination on the grounds of unequal treatment because heterosexuals are never prosecuted. but not tapping your toe. Meanwhile, sidebar in Fresno, a lesbian couple has, one member of them has just given birth to quadruplets.
It's easy for you to laugh at.
Oh, you bet. They already have 7 children.
And, you know.
Two that they have given birth to, and 5 special needs kids that they have adopted. They now have 11 children.
And they still can't get married in that state.
Exactly.
There is a court case working its way through the courts, which we are hopeful about.
Yes.
But there also is, the voters out there voted in 2000 to ban same-sex marriage, although our side argues, no, they banned recognition of people coming from out of state who are married.
It's a little
that's the technicality.
Yeah.
But the legislature, for the second time, both houses of the legislature, this is the only legislature in the United States that has done this, has once again, the Senate did it, the Assembly had already done it, have passed a bill to do it. Now, we have the website of Equality California, that's eqca.org. Go to their website, especially if you live in California, and try to figure out how you can get to Schwarzenegger.
Send a letter or a message to Governor Schwarzenegger to ask him to sign the bill. He is expected to veto it again, but he has to decide by October 14th. And even Human Rights Watch, an international human rights organization, has weighed in asking him to sign the bill. But again, we're not hopeful. Meanwhile, various cities around California have passed resolutions endorsing marriage equality. L.A., San Jose, Long Beach, Oakland. San Diego City Council split 4-4 on it, so they did not sign on to endorsing it. And one of the people who voted against it was the woman who was supposed to be a great liberal, who was almost made mayor of San Diego, who said we needed more of a public hearing on this. Come on.
The issue still makes people nervous. It still makes John Corzine nervous. He's the governor of New Jersey. He signed a civil union bill, which has not been working out because there's been like 1,500 people, I think, who've registered, and already, hundreds of them have complaints about their 278 have complaints about their unions not being recognized. So he met with the gay press. We weren't there. We weren't there.
He was at a brunch with the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association this past weekend.
And, they asked him about it, and he said, it won't be on my agenda for the next election, and I don't want you to bring this up right now. I don't want this front and center when we're having a presidential election. It will hurt things.
Well, what he said was it shouldn't be on the agenda before the 2008 presidential election, but he said it would be appropriate to be on the agenda for his re-election in 2009.
Right.
So he's saying, first of all, he would happily sign the bill whenever it is given to him if the legislature passes the
which is
marriage
not
bill.
quite the same thing as saying I'm all for it.
I disagree. I think he has said he's all for it. He's just questioning the timing. He is one of now 2 governors, along with Spitzer, who has said, I will happily sign a marriage bill.
Well, then you could argue that Hillary Clinton is not totally against same-sex marriage, because it's obviously getting talked about a lot in Iowa, where we had a good court ruling last week. And she was asked about it, and she said it should be left up to the states. They're deciding it in the states, and that's the appropriate place for it to be. Civil unions, marriage, whatever they decide.
But
so that's not blocking
said
it.
She personally is opposed to same-sex marriage.
I don't care how she feels personally. I don't care how any of these people feel personally.
But you can't call her a supporter.
No. It's not the same thing as saying, because every Republican is saying, no, we need to stop this.
Yes.
And then Giuliani says, oh, no, this is why we need judges in the vein of Alito, Roberts, and Scalia.
Yeah.
They left out Clarence Thomas, the black guy.
This is the great liberal Giuliani, who you all think would be just fine as president. No!
He wants to appoint monsters to the Supreme Court.
Just like himself, monsters. And I think I implied, because this was what I had read last week, that the governor of Iowa was suggesting that maybe the court decision supporting same-sex marriage that has been stayed while the higher court in Iowa takes it on, that he was supportive of it, but in fact he has said no, he's against it. He's just asking for a delay in the legislature doing anything about it. But meanwhile, gay activists in Iowa have pointed out that the state Democratic Party platform supports marriage equality.
As does New York and a couple of other states.
And he is a Democratic governor, and yet now he is ignoring the platform, which supports the theory that platforms are meaningless.
Now, Pennsylvania bans same-sex marriage, and not through constitutional amendment, but through law. But a woman there is bringing a case where she's seeking unemployment compensation from the state because she had to move with her partner of 8 years to Florida. And usually unemployment benefits follow. But
if you are forced to move with your spouse.
Right. So she's suing over this and saying...
Because she is not allowed to be a spouse. Right. So she is saying the Pennsylvania is trying to have it both ways. On the one hand, they say you have to be married. On the other hand, they're saying you can't be married.
She can marry a man. She's not being discriminated against. That's what they say in this country.
Find a man who's living out of state that she can...
Well, this is what people do in the immigration situation.
And back in New Jersey,
find somebody.
Garden State Equality, the gay statewide rights organization there, is asking the state of New Jersey not to renew the tax exemption for Ocean Grove, which, as a Methodist-owned community, has been given a state tax exemption for years, but that tax exemption includes language that says the public spaces are supposed to be available to everyone. Ocean Grove has refused to let a lesbian couple hold a civil union in the gazebo on the beach. And Garden State Equality says, well, look, New Jersey, you can't have it both ways, or they can't. Either if they're going to get the tax exemption, the space has to be public. If they want to ban people, then they shouldn't get the tax exemption anymore.
It's the same thing with the Boy Scouts.
Yes.
All right, you want to discriminate, but you're not going to get any special benefits from the government, which they do get a lot of still.
Yes, although that argument has worked with the Boy Scouts in a lot of communities.
Occasionally. They haven't been, they've hardly been cut off. Well, shall we go to Congress?
Okay.
The Employment Non-Discrimination Act had its first hearing in this Congress.
This is a bill that was originally introduced 33 years ago as a much more comprehensive bill.
It was just an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1965, adding the category of sexual orientation. Then they decided they couldn't do
By
this.
Bella Abzug and Ed Koch.
Yeah. Of all people.
Yeah.
This is back in like early 70s.
74.
Right. So they, somewhere along the line, they got all the civil rights...
It went nowhere.
They got all the civil rights groups together, and they agreed on some kind of compromise legislation. It's not comprehensive. It doesn't cover housing or public accommodations.
It's employment only.
And it's only some employment. And it certainly doesn't go after the Boy Scouts or big religious exemption clause, et cetera, all that kind of stuff.
But they did have it was originally introduced just as a sexual orientation non-discrimination in employment law some years ago when they saw that the more comprehensive bill was going nowhere. They thought, well, at least we can get employment protections through. And then there was a big fight a few years ago about whether they would also add gender identity or expression to it.
And people like Barney Frank were against that, saying it's not going to go anywhere. But
and so was the Human Rights Campaign.
Right.
The task force supported it. They all came around.
Task force withdrew its support for the bill when transgender was excluded.
But it was added, and now the bill is moving forward in Congress and seems to have a chance of actually getting somewhere this year, although the president, you remember him, is very likely to veto any version of it, no matter what it's attached to.
And it has some Republican support.
It does.
And the churches are getting organized around this now, and they're claiming, it's going to infringe on their religious liberty. That's their line.
Even though the bill specifically exempts religious institutions, but they look at the Ocean Grove case and they say, well, our church employment may be protected, but if we own 6 other corporations, I guess we're going to have to hire gay people. So they held a hearing at the House Committee on Education and Labor Subcommittee. Barney Frank and Tammy Baldwin testified. People who've been fired testified. Lee Badgett of the Williams Institute testified and talked about firings and discrimination and what value is brought by protecting people and how that helps the economy and people and all sorts of things. So watch for the progress of
discrimination hurts, Badgett said, but non-discrimination laws actually appear to help.
Yeah. All right, now I want to go back to California for one of my favorite stories of the week. San Diego erected a private statue with private funds on private land to Pete Wilson.
You remember him? He was the governor out there.
He was also the mayor of San Diego
Nasty piece of work.
And there was almost a riot over this because when Pete Wilson was the mayor from 71 to 83 in San Diego, He refused to meet with gay activists to talk about the fact that the police were conducting extensive raids of gay bars, arresting people for lewd conduct, where have we heard that before, beating gay people. And then he became governor, and the state passed a SONDA, a Non-Discrimination Act, and he vetoed it. And there were huge riots in Sacramento, in L.A., in San Francisco, in San Diego, West Hollywood. This was in the 90s, a flood of law. He said if he signed it, there would be a flood of lawsuits against businesses.
Yeah, right.
So,
it's anti-business.
So hundreds of activists showed up in San Diego this
Tear
week.
down the statue, tear down the hate. Pete Wilson's got to go, racist, sexist, homophobe. So he gets up and he says...
He's alive. He's there.
He's only 74. We're almost there, Ann. Isn't this a great country, he says, where anyone can stand up and make a perfect horse's ass out of themselves at any time? You're all going to have nodules on your vocal cords and make a lot of money for throat surgeons. It reminds me, and I don't mind saying, I remember doing this once with 5 people when they had the 100th anniversary of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and they did it right in front of the church with Walter Cronkite presiding, CBS News, and all the dignitaries are there. We got 5 people down there, and we started screaming, gay rights now at them. The thing is, with the arches of the church, you couldn't hear anything they were saying. So a cop says to me, you know, you're not doing your cause a lot of good. These days, they just arrest us and get us out of there for some reason. We were allowed to protest in those days. You're not doing your cause. And we said, we don't care. After what they've done to us and what they've said to us, I think you know what I'm talking about. So that was rather joyful.
And I'll bet it was quite joyful. Oh, and then some dog peed on the plaque in the ground by the statue, and that was considered the, the perfect denouement to this whole thing.
All right.
All right, moving on to other things.
Well, James Kennedy is dead. He was the founder of the Moral Majority and a very big anti-gay church. One of the really, you don't hear his name much, but he was really one of the
Coral Ridge
brains,
Ministries,
if we can call it that.
Well, the irony was that his church is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which has become such a big gay community and is now fighting with the anti-gay mayor. But he was very close to the Christian Reconstructionists, who are the ones who
are taking over the country.
Death to homosexuals, that's what the Bible says, and they don't want to just lock us up, they want to kill us.
And speaking of that, the Michael Sandy case, this is the kid where...
Can I interrupt you for 1
1
second to alert our viewers that on September 17th, there is going to be a values voters debate of Republican candidates in Fort Lauderdale that should be a real horror show.
Is Rudy going? He was confronted about his values by one of the voters in New Hampshire on the TV, and he just changed the subject.
Well, that's what he does.
He says, I don't want to talk about my private life.
Yeah. I'm a leader. I'm an effective leader.
Yeah.
I put the emergency center in the World Trade Center, and it blew up along with everything else.
Anyway.
September 17th, Value Voters Debate.
Michael Sandy was this 29-year-old guy in New York last year who was lured to a rest area by these guys who said that they wanted to have sex with, or a guy who said he wanted to have sex with him. They wanted to rob him. He ran into the highway, and he was hit and eventually died there on the Bell Parkway. And there were a lot of motions made to exclude evidence in this case.
Because they've been charged with a hate crime, and the question is whether they say, well, they didn't hate him.
Well, one of the guys is turning state's evidence, and he's saying that they were joking about this, that the other guys were joking about this when they got home and when they were reading about it in the press. So these are fine, upstanding citizens.
Well, here another
case seems to be going
it's
the
proceeding.
state's way.
Yes. A couple of things not going our way in the military. The soldier who was in the Army Old Guard who had been accused of sexual harassment and was being threatened with being thrown out, he was convicted on 3 counts. This is all regarded as trumped-up charges because they suspect he's gay, which he's never admitted to. He's been demoted. He was expected to be kicked out. He has been reassigned. He has not been kicked out, but he has been convicted and demoted. And then there's the story of this guy, Randy Miller, who is an Iraq vet. He fell 900 feet from an airplane when his chutes didn't open properly, survived, but of course heavily damaged, outed by a soldier he had rejected in a gay bar. He's been kicked out of the military and forced to repay the bonus he got for signing on.
It's a great country, isn't it?
Fell 900 feet from a plane.
So who says that we're not upholding standards in this country
Repay your
homosexuality?
bonus.
Well, we have to protect the family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they say.
Yes, I know.
I mean, they should be confronted about these specific cases.
We're a threat to civilization.
Yeah. Well, Dave Kopay, the famous, the first guy to come out who was a pro football player, he came out after he was in the NFL back in '75, but he has donated $1 million to the Gay Student Center at the University of Washington, his alma mater.
Yes. Which will be paid after his death. He's 65. He expects to have a long time to go, but he decided that's what he's going to do with his money. In Arkansas, the Attorney General has refused to certify a proposed referendum for the ballot on gay foster parents, forbidding gay foster parents, but don't get too excited yet. He told the right-wingers who proposed it, you just have to rewrite it, fix a couple of things, make it apply to everyone who's unmarried, and then I'll certify this for the ballot.
Here in New York, in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Borough Park, they're about to elect as a judge Noach Deer, who was the most famous anti-gay bigot in the city council in the mid-1980s into the 90s, led the fight, and he is getting the support of all the political establishment out there.
Rejected by the New York City Bar Association as unqualified.
And rejected by the Times. And this guy's a corrupt crook.
Horrible.
Beyond being an anti-gay bigot. It's a disgrace that he's going to be on the bench.
So don't bring any civil cases in Brooklyn, because if you have Noach Deer as your judge, you're in tremendous trouble. But another court case in Texas, a guy who was passing himself off as a counselor to transform gays, an ex-gay counselor, help people become ex-gays, has been convicted of sexually abusing his clients and sentenced to 10 years in jail.
Nothing surprises me.
Horrible.
Good news in New Hampshire. The Human Rights Campaign's opening up an office up there.
Yes, Concord.
Because of all the stuff that's going on with the presidential campaigns up there.
Well, New Hampshire, one of the first states, so they're going to be part of the whole election scene. An out gay lawyer has been appointed to a vacancy on the North Carolina Court of Appeals, making him the first out gay statewide public official in North Carolina.
In Connecticut, they're seriously looking at passing a transgender rights bill. It looks like it's moving through. I mean, it had minor opposition in the state Senate.
And watch out, you may hear about a new...
We don't have that in New York, by the way.
A new study about the effects of reparative therapy, scheduled to be released this week after we tape this show, so it may be out already, but it's authored by a couple of Christian right-wingers, Christian in quotes. So don't think that that's coming necessarily from real information.
Back to transgender rights. This is taking place in Seattle. The restroom arrests for transgendered people. Transgendered people don't know where the hell to go to the bathroom sometimes, and often get bladder infections because they're afraid to go in public. But you know, people are getting arrested for going to quote unquote the wrong one, and even though they have a law protecting transgender rights statewide. Yes.
And a really horrible story out of Oregon. A guy has been convicted. He got 25 years in prison for raping an 11-year-old boy for 2 years. He was married to the boy's mother. He was the stepfather. He was mad at the mother, so he decided he would rape the child to turn him gay, to punish the mother.
We need a little education about this subject in this country, I think, if that's what people perceive.
Exactly.
Psycho.
Yeah. Definitely a psycho.
The Trevor Project, which, you know, did you know it was National Suicide Prevention Week, September 9th through the 15th? Well, it's almost over. But they do, this is the national hotline for gay and questioning youth to call, and they're launching a project called Don't Erase Your Queer Future. Trying to teach everybody about gay history, and saying, oh, what if Walt Whitman had committed suicide? We wouldn't have had all those great poems. This is kind of what it says. I mean, it's a little odd, but, you know, they do good work.
A leader of Parents and Friends of Ex-Gays,
yes,
PFOX, in Arlington, Virginia, has been revealed to have lied about being physically assaulted by gay people at the Arlington, Virginia County Fair.
Boy.
They're making it up now.
Speaking of liars, where am I going to? Washington, D.C. to American University, where the Alumni Magazine publishes a wedding announcement for Ross Weil and Brett Royce, and they're now suing because they were roommates, but they're not gay and they didn't get married.
It was a joke.
Somebody sent it in and said that one of them was the chief officer of the Gay Rights Brigade. I don't even think there is such a thing.
No. But I kind of like that name. Maybe we'll take that on.
The Gay Rights Brigade.
Yeah, whatever.
And the Smithsonian.
A great celebration for Frank Kameny at the Smithsonian Institution, the unveiling of his papers and memorabilia. And they're right up there with Judy Garland's red slippers from The Wizard of Oz and
they are.
Everything
The whole
else.
thing is gay. All right. If you want to sign up for if you want to learn more about our podcast, or actually go to where our podcast, you can find our podcast. Go to gayusatv.org, and you can find it. That's our website. And if you want to get on our email list for weekly program updates, you would email me, andyhum@aol.com. There it is.
And moving now to international news, I'm really sorry I'm not in London right now watching the BBC series on the 50th anniversary of the Wolfenden Committee report recommending decriminalization of homosexuality. They're doing
a huge breakthrough in the Western world.
Amazing. Really. They've been having arrests and stuff, and so the government appointed this commission of really right-wingers to examine what to do about this problem.
Well, let's say conservatives.
Conservatives.
You know,
and the conservatives looked at this and they said, you know what? What we do about this problem is we decriminalize homosexuality. And this was 50 years ago. It was an amazing thing. And they told the government to get out of people's private lives. So the BBC is doing a week of programming called Hidden Lives. And what has happened? Organized right-wingers in the United States and Canada are objecting to this week of program.
Good. Good. They probably object to Bertrand Delanoë. He's the mayor of Paris, out gay man, and is running for a second term. He's a socialist. They're now saying that he may be the next socialist candidate for president of the country.
Yeah, and the Paris mayor serves a 7-year term. So that's how long he's been in office. Sad news from Uzbekistan, where Mark Weil, a theater director of iconoclastic plays, a lot of which were gay-themed, was stabbed to death by two attackers, two young men who waited outside his apartment. They haven't detailed their objections to him, but certainly this is believed to be one of the reasons.
In Moscow, the courts have upheld the ban on the gay pride parade there, so it's illegal.
Clever Troy Perry, the founder of the Metropolitan Community Church, went to Singapore to give a speech, and the authorities said, you cannot give a speech. You are not allowed to give a speech. You can only speak to people one-on-one.
So he spoke to them one-on-one in front of an audience. One by one, they came up and asked him questions, and he said, well, let me tell you what I think about that. Well, very good, Troy. And of course, to the anal government, that was okay.
That's fine. He was following the rules. The Canadian government is going to announce a census of gay couples in Canada, but the gay community is so angry at the way the census was conducted because married gay couples who are supposed to have, be equally married as heterosexual couples are, were asked not to fill out the form as married, but to fill it out as other. So the census figures are not believed to be very believable.
Let's go to Havana, where the Roman Catholic Vicar General there supports stable same-sex relationships being protected by the civil laws. I guess he's not going to be the Vicar General for long.
Cuba is an iconoclast.
When the Holy Father and or his boyfriend finds out about that.
He wants civil laws to protect same-sex couples.
And they voided same-sex marriage in Malaysia.
And in Israel, the Prime Minister is the happy grandfather of a new grandchild born to his daughter's female partner. And he's celebrating that. And you may want to check out a new group, an international gay activist group started online as a Yahoo group to talk to each other. Petrellis is involved in this, and
Michael
others.
Petrellis.
Gays Without Borders at yahoogroups.com. Send them a message and you can find out what's going on with them. And big news from South America, where the Human Rights Committee of the Southern Common Market, which is most of the South American countries, has passed a resolution endorsing full gay equality in those countries.
Big breakthrough.
Huge. If the Southern Common Market itself adopts this, this is going to be enormous.
Will be an isolated island of bigotry in the United States.
We're going to talk a lot about AIDS news in Africa with our guest, Louise Hogarth, in a minute after we do entertainment news. But we do have some breaking news from New York, where the health commissioner is announcing some new statistics on new infections and saying that they're up among young men who have
30s.
sex with men.
Up 33% in the last 6 years.
But down among older men.
And AIDS activists did go down to that pool down there in Alabama and for a family reunion, and they said it all went very well on the Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, the RV trailer park owner has not really changed his mind on dangers of transmission among children, but the event went off peacefully. All right, entertainment news.
Sure.
Why I continue to dislike Star Jones, although I can't stop watching the train wreck that is her new show on Court TV. She had on Rita Cosby, who's written this new book about Anna Nicole Smith's various exes. And there's this story that I was skeptical of last week because we didn't have a lot of information about
the father
and Howard and Larry Burkhead
being lovers and Anna Nicole watching a tape of them making love.
Yeah.
That's the story.
So Star Jones has her on. She says, there are scurrilous rumors in this book, and I am not going to say what they are because they are so scurrilous that they are not repeatable by me on television. Then the next day she comes on
as opposed to everybody else.
She says, viewers have asked me what the scurrilous rumors are that I wouldn't talk about. And I have to say that I couldn't talk about them because they could be libelous, and I'm not going to get myself in the middle of a legal battle.
Please.
Star, it is not libelous to call someone gay.
We told you Jerry Lewis slurred gay people last week during his telethon for the muscular dystrophy. He did. He called somebody an illiterate fag. And so he was caught. What are you going to do? You're on tape, Jerry. So now he's apologizing to everybody and said, this is not who I am. Everybody who knows me.
He apologized to anyone who was offended.
Yeah, well.
It was a joking
He said there are no excuses. I am sorry. So.
I hold no prejudices in this regard.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
If you think it's okay to use that language, yes, you do.
We've been telling you they're going to make a movie about the life of Harvey Milk and by Gus Van Sant, and now they're talking about Sean Penn as playing Harvey. Interesting choice.
The new gay TV judge has started. You can see him in New York opposite The View. This is why none of us will ever see him, Judge David Young.
The movie Cruising is in re-release. I was part of the protest against this. And the loathsome Billy Friedkin, who made this movie, has the nerve to tell somebody at the New York Press, well, I made it because we were so worried about AIDS and the mysterious deaths that people were going through. There was no AIDS crisis in 1979. No one knew anything about it. No one. And you are a pig, and so are the people at the New York Press for publishing that.
New show to keep your eye on at MTV starting October 9th at 10 p.m. A Shot at Love with Tila Tequila, the most popular person on MySpace. She will be choosing among 16 men and 16 lesbians as her inamorata.
Margaret Cho's got a show coming to town, The Sensuous Woman.
Yeah. Want to tell me about plays you saw?
A busy week in the theater.
Purple Hearts?
I deserve one for sitting through the first act. Next.
Stoppard Goes Electric?
There are reasons these television plays have not been reproduced in 30 years.
Billy the Mime in America Love, Sex, Death.
A Jeffrey Dahmer sketch? Eating, please.
Andy is miming horror. Dangerous Corner by J.B. Priestley.
The best thing I saw all week. This
Really?
guy is, he's the guy who did an Inspector Calls. It's a drawing room comedy, kind of mystery comedy kind of a thing, where people say, good God, man, and all that kind of stuff, and it's wonderful. It's the intricate plot. I highly recommend it at the Boomerang Theater.
That's Dangerous Corner. And finally, Till the Break of Dawn by Danny Hoke.
This is down at the Henry Street Settlement. He's very talented, hip-hop white guy. Much too long, and it's a little bit like I Love Lucy Goes to Havana. All these kids, who are lefty types go down to Havana, and I think in a way he kind of mocks them in a way, which I didn't particularly like. But it has moments of great insight.
Dangerous Corner by J.B. Priestley,
Yes,
the
that's
top
the
of the list. And let us turn to our guest. We are very pleased to welcome as our guest this week Louise Hogarth, provocative filmmaker, title she bears proudly.
Academy Award-winning filmmaker.
Exactly, for the Panama Deception. You may know her best for her film of a few years ago, which is still playing in hundreds of film festivals around the world, The Gift, about gay men giving and receiving HIV voluntarily. We'll talk about that, too. But your new film coming out this week in New York, Angels in the Dust, is a documentary about AIDS orphans in South Africa. And I will admit to you, even as a longtime AIDS activist, AIDS educator, someone deeply concerned with and immersed in these issues, that when I thought about going to a screening of this film, I thought, AIDS orphans in South Africa. It is a very provocative, compelling, intimate, human story that I found tremendously involving and entertaining in the sense of...
We can see some scenes from the camp.
It's about a Dutch couple, I guess, who establish a village for 500 orphaned kids in South Africa, educate them, house them, feed them, have created this community.
It's a middle-aged couple that was living pretty well and just decided what?
They were an extremely wealthy couple, and they've always been activists. They've always been involved in the struggle against apartheid. They lived in a very wealthy area, and they took children in over the years because during apartheid, the maids weren't allowed to keep their children. They had to go back to the township, so they hid children. And then as time went on, more and more children came to live with them, and they were forced out of their neighborhood. And they went to Magaliesburg 18 years ago. They've been there for 18 years. They didn't start with this many children. They went out and established this trust, and then the AIDS epidemic really hit, and then more and more children came, and then people actually come to live in the surrounding area, which is also land owned by the trust, and then as they die, the children live full-time with the Clutie family.
What brought you to this place and to make this film?
I am a South African resident, and I live part of the year in South Africa. Friends of mine told me about the family, and we were trying to think of a way to address the issue of the virgin rape myth in South Africa, which is also a myth that existed in the United States and in England. They thought if you had sex with a virgin, you could get rid of syphilis or gonorrhea. Now, in this desperate times in South Africa, people believe if you have sex with a virgin, you can get rid of HIV, and there's a lot of baby rapes occurring. But it was like way too depressing for me to think of making a film like that, and they said to me, they impeached me to go. I didn't want to do another AIDS film after The Gift, but they said they're just angels in the dust. Angels in the dust, you have to come. So I went up, I flew up from Cape Town, and when I met the family, I thought that many of the issues Marion is dealing with are the same issues that we're dealing with in the West. A loss of spirituality, wondering what are we doing in our lives to make a difference. She deals a lot with death counseling, with rape, with family issues. The thing that drew me to Marion the most was the fact that she's trying to break the cycle of victim-perpetrator, victim-perpetrator, which is what I see in The Gift, the same thing, victim-perpetrator. And her work, she works with spirit guides, and she's healing the children. And there's a lot of joy there. It's just not the awful AIDS crisis. It shows the joy, and it shows the children as just normal children, instead of, I think a lot of times Africa is perceived as other, like they're other.
And your film completely humanizes the situation and introduces us to individuals, makes us care about them, is joyful, is heartbreaking, is angering. All of that is in this film. And I want to show an excerpt of it so people get a little sense of who these people are, both the Cluties who run this community and the children they're dealing with. So let's take a little look at an excerpt.
Onto the farm. Many people came to us with really bad social problems. And we started just taking people in.
And our policy here is anybody who asks for help cannot be turned away.
So we realized as we built our village that the only way you survive is by coming together as a community regardless of background. You come together and you build together. Because you've lived here a few years now, eh?
I'm to speak about my life.
Your life. That's nice. What would you like to speak about?
The time I was young, before I came here. My mom and dad went to work. And the man came and he said that Bosi must go out, and Bosi refused. And then he kicked Bosi out. And then he said I must undress, and I told him I can't. He took his hand and put it in front of my mouth. And I was wearing skates, and then he pulled the skates off and started raping me. That man, he had voice, and then he said, when I tell anyone he's going to kill me. And then he ran out of the window. And then when I tried to tell my mom, she said that no one was there. And I tried to tell her that there was somebody that raped me, and she said that it's not true.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. It was very painful.
How old is that little girl, Lillian, in that segment?
Well, when I first started filming her in 2004, she was 8 years old.
She's so beautiful.
Yeah, she's really beautiful. Some of the children I filmed were quite short. A lot of them aren't in the movie, and they grew over the years, and she hasn't grown at all, though. She stayed the same height. Marion thinks it's because of the trauma of the rape.
That is certainly one of the most poignant parts of the film. There is also joy in the film, and there are some moments that are quite provocative, where Marion is yelling at a mother who won't let her child be treated.
Lillian's mom,
Tested,
Tested.
Right.
And where she is also talking about men as serial killers for continuing to have unprotected sex. This is quite a challenging film, and quite a provocative woman.
Yes, she is. I think you have to be a very strong person in order to do the work that Marion does.
Well, you talk about breaking the cycle, and clearly the Cluties are trying to break the cycle and working with these children, but the country is engulfed in AIDS, and you know about it a lot more than we do. What is going to turn that around? You have a government that still doesn't want to acknowledge things, that still wants to, and you talk about this in the film, wants to use beetroot and garlic to solve it rather than antiretroviral drugs. Marion is inveighing against that and screaming about that in the film. What is going to break this cycle?
I suppose if there was a movement similar to the anti-apartheid movement. I mean, if people boycotted South Africa as far as tourism, because of course, then the downside of that is they need the tourists, because they need the money.
Mandela is it now, not when he was
Mandela's
president,
launching
now
a new
is
campaign.
Now is outspoken on AIDS. He doesn't.
And Desmond Tutu.
I think what we need is, and this is why I made the gift, not so much to expose this behavior, but to expose the dismal failure of prevention. And the failure that we developed here in the United States when we thought it was, in the early stages which worked, is a total failure now. And we have exported that to countries like South Africa, where they have the Love Life campaign, which is millions of dollars funded by Kaiser Foundation, now by Gates, and it says Love Life. And I have not talked, a picture of beautiful people sitting in a living room like this, Love Life. That's the HIV/AIDS prevention campaign. I haven't talked to one person who knows what the billboard means. We need to change the way prevention's done.
But but I mean, to say that, I mean, I was certainly involved in prevention efforts myself, and they saved a lot of lives in this country, and a lot of us adopted safer sexual practices, and a lot of us, you know, I'm testament, you know, have had sex lives and not become HIV infected. I mean, it worked for many people. I mean, in this country at least. I mean, I'm not saying we don't have to change what we're doing.
Well, I don't think you can argue, though, with the numbers, which are astronomical. The rates are astronomical, the infection rates.
The rates of infection in this country are not astronomical.
They are. They're the biggest killer in Los Angeles, in the black community.
But they're not, I'm saying that
and in the gay community, they're huge
numbers. But they're not
numbers.
what they were in the 80s and 90s.
I think that they are. I think they're pretty big.
Well, I mean,
people are dying in a different way.
It's just, I mean...
Well, I have an office sponsored by AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and they tell me about their testing results that they're getting, and they're very high.
We just reported on some upticks, but they're nowhere near what they were in those periods.
Well, it's hard. It's difficult to tell, because when we test today in some states, if you test anonymously, I know New York City did this when I made the gift. I don't know what the policy is now. But if you tested anonymously and tested positive, your test wasn't reported as a statistic. So when I was here, I remember Itay Hod, who was a reporter from New York 1, called and got the stats, and they told him it was a very low number. And he said, that's impossible. It's much higher. And that's when they explained to him, oh, if you test positive anonymously, we don't count your tests. The tests are, the rate of infection in this country is huge.
Well, let's talk about about the gift. And Andy and I were discussing this before we started the show today, talking about the gift and these kinds of approaches. The ad for the gift, the poster, showed a gun in a penis.
Smoking.
And one of my assessments as an AIDS educator is that, in fact, what did cut the infection rates and drove people to safe sex was fear.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Was seeing people who were their immediate friends, people they could identify with, dying. And that drove people to an immediate sense of their own risk and convinced them to practice safe sex.
But you also needed
that when it is more theoretical and more outside, it is less easy for people to make that change in what is very intimate and personal behavior. But this has been the debate that has raged for years. Do you scare people into safe sex? Do you lead them into it with more positive messages?
Well, that hasn't worked.
Well, it has worked in some ways, but it has not worked entirely.
Wait a minute. I mean, certainly we were afraid, and that's what motivated us, but people needed something to embrace, something positive that they could do, our willingness to tell people how to have sex. And what we found, and we worked on this since the beginning of the crisis, was the number one thing that made people be safe was having a sense of their own futures. And this is what a lot of gay people didn't have in the beginning. Having a sense that you had a future, that you had a life, embracing a positive gay identity. These are things that I think are the things that really cut infection.
But we're now talking about a worldwide pandemic with hundreds of millions, or tens of millions at least, maybe hundreds of millions of people infected. Certainly people in South Africa, in this film and everywhere else you look, seeing their family and friends dying on a daily basis around them, 900 a day in South Africa, and yet it doesn't seem to be changing. So what do you take from, as a South African or living there, what do you take from watching the culture operate on a daily basis?
Well, I think when the president of Uganda implemented his policy to stop AIDS, which was, I can't remember, it was about protecting yourself and abstinence, protecting, and
faithful and
ABC. That was very successful. That worked very well, and he took the leadership. But there's no leadership in South Africa.
And he's retreated from that somewhat, and they're now talking about criminalizing transmission all over Africa.
Are they? I
as
didn't
a
know
sort
that.
of desperation move.
Well, they never be able to be in jail because, I mean...
Well, what has been the result of The Gift? The Gift was a film about a specific subgroup of gay men who were sort of fetishizing HIV and having it, and some people feeling left out if they didn't have it and wanting to acquire it, or not, or being tired of practicing safe sex and wanting to sort of get beyond that and get it. Yeah.
They talk about it.
So what has been the reaction to that, and what do you think the results of that film have been?
The reaction to the film was really positive. When I screened in New York City, I had a standing ovation for which was a 90% gay male audience. When I screened in San Francisco with 1,000 gay men, they all stayed for the discussion. I was thanked for making the film. People want the information out there. They want the knowledge out there. They realize that the film's just not about gift givers and people who identify. The film is about this whole don't ask, don't tell that's in the culture now. I mean, you don't ask, I don't tell. There's just no talking about HIV/AIDS. It's just gone away. Nobody's got it. It's just this glamorized positive disease now where you see beautiful images. It's not a big deal. We need to implement, I think, prevention campaign like they did for smoking. Doug in my film talks about, he wasn't worried about getting HIV because he knew there was a pill. He was worried about smoking because he'd seen the woman with the trach in her throat, and he really knew there was no cure for lung cancer. But he didn't worry about HIV. Unfortunately, The Gift was never backed by the large AIDS Inc., as I call them, which is probably not correct, but it's my provocative way, AIDS Inc., GMHC here in New York City. I took it to GMHC. We had roundtable conversations with Anna Oliveira. We talked to their prevention people. They said they knew this behavior exists. The head of the prevention department, I mean, I heard this over and over and over. My boyfriend and I went out after the film. We talked for 3 hours. This is such a great movie. We've got to get it out there. But it was never embraced by those organizations. Film should have been shown in every gay center, I think, in America. I didn't villainize people. I could have. I didn't try to make people guilty. I understand how difficult it would be to reveal your status. Terribly difficult. It's an intimate moment. It's just easier to kind of forget about it. But we can't keep sacrificing those who aren't infected because we want to protect those who are. It's wrong. And we just seem to have lost our moral compass in the gay community.
Well, we are down to our last minute, and we've wanted
we've got about 6 more hours to talk to you about, but we're not going to get to it.
What are those bracelets you're wearing?
Oh, thank you for asking. Thank you. These are made by women in the Eastern Cape. It's a form of employment. I'm hoping they're going to become similar to identify the orphan AIDS crisis. People will wear these bracelets and they can get more information about them on Angels in the Dust in my website. They're made by women who have nothing, and this is a source of employment. I have kids working on them who are now teenagers who are AIDS orphans, who have no money.
And if people want to learn more about the film in general,
Angels in the Dust.
Go to that website.
And the film's not depressing. You won't be depressed.
It's not, I promise.
It's joyful as well as informative.
And compelling. It is a compelling film, and it opens Friday, tomorrow in New York.
That's right. At Cinema Village East, and I will be there leading a Q&A Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Please come out and see it.
Okay, and thank you, Louise Hogarth. And
thank you.
You have more provocative films coming up
yes, I do.
in the future, and maybe you'll come back and talk to us about those. And we will be back next week, and we'll see you all then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.